This interview was made possible by the Grove Entertainment Complex Comedy Club and Goat Lab Brewery. Welcome to this special edition of NWA Exchange. Today we sit down with Brandon Carter, an experienced prosecutor and dedicated public servant running for the Arkansas Court of Appeals. Join us as we explore his vision, experience, and what sets him apart in this important race.
All right, I'm here today with an NWA Exchange. I'm here with Travis Harp, and I'm also here with Brandon Carter. He's going to be running for Court of Appeals, right?
Yes, sir.
Understand? Okay. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So 25 years ago, a little more than 25 years ago now, my wife, Tasha, and I decided to make Northwest Arkansas our home. We've been here for a quarter century at this point. We've raised our two daughters here. We've both been in public service the entire time that we've lived here in Northwest Arkansas. Me as a prosecuting attorney, my wife worked for the community college setting in Bentonville for a number of years.
Okay. So the Court of Appeals, to educate people about it, the cases that are appealed to you, there's civil, there's criminal, there's domestic, right? What else am I missing?
The Court of Appeals, I like to describe to people as largely an anonymous court.
Okay.
It's anonymous because it's an intermediate appellate court. It's not a district court where if you get a speeding ticket, you're going to go pay your fine. It's not a circuit court where you're going to get called to go to jury duty. It's not the highest court in Arkansas, the Arkansas Supreme Court, that gets all the news. It's the first level of appellate court after the trial courts.
Okay.
And it hears anything that comes up from the trial courts on appeal. That can be anything from a criminal case, and I think the majority of their docket is criminal cases, but then a lot of domestic cases that fall into the civil realm. And any kind of civil litigation can be heard there as well.
Juvenile too? Is it?
Yes, juvenile
Okay.
as well can be heard there, which would fall actually into the civil realm. It's a civil matter in juvenile cases, even though my office as prosecutor is the one that handles them.
Okay. So you have 12 judges on the appellate, right? And there's one senior senior judge. Is that right? Is it
Correct? Yeah, there's one senior appellate judge or a chief appellate judge over the 12 judges. They hear statewide cases, but they're elected regionally.
okay?
There are 12 of these judges. Our region has 2. Each region has 2, except for 2 very small regions that only have 1 each. The 2 judges on the appellate court, the Court of Appeals in our region, Region 3, are Kenneth Hickson and Judge Bob Gladwin, who is retiring, and that's the seat I'm running to fill.
Okay. So you all are running 8-year terms, right? Am I right?
That's correct. They're on 8-year staggered terms. So
the senior judge position, how do you get to that point? Is it is that you voted in by the other 12, or how does that process work? Where you
It's an elected position, yes.
Okay.
And it's one that I don't have any desire to hold, quite frankly. I see it largely as an administrative and political position.
Okay.
It's largely in charge of distributing the cases amongst the other 11 judges.
So now the 12 judges, their backgrounds, are the backgrounds capable to handle all those areas of expertise, or is there a certain person that's specifically focused on criminal cases, one for juvenile, or are you multifaceted?
Everybody on the Arkansas Court of Appeals is a generalist. Essentially, they can be assigned any case that is appealed to the Arkansas Court of Appeals. There are a lot of diverse backgrounds on the Arkansas Court of Appeals. There is nobody on the Court of Appeals that is a career prosecutor. There's nobody on the Court of Appeals that's a career defense attorney either. There's nobody that's specialized their entire career in the criminal system, which makes up the largest percentage of what that court hears.
Wow, that's important for everyone to know, I think, and that's something that I didn't realize. So thanks for pointing that out. Thanks for being here, by the way.
Happy to be here.
I was wanting to know, because I represent Bella Vista citizens and my constituents. They oftentimes will ask me who to vote for. So this is a great opportunity to tell them why you're the best candidate. And also, I was wondering, could you tell us a little more about the district that you'd be covering and who has the opportunity to vote for you in this election?
Certainly, I'll begin with that if that's okay with you.
Sure.
It's a 7-county district, so geographically a rather large district. Benton, Carroll, Washington, Madison, Crawford, Franklin, and Johnson counties makes up our Court of Appeals district. So the 2 judges that hold the Court of Appeals seat for District 3 cover those 7 counties. So I'll be on the ballot in all 7 of those counties on March 3rd.
So I was curious, Could you tell us the process that someone would use to end up in your court?
Certainly. The first thing that's going to happen to end up in the Court of Appeals is you have to have had an adverse ruling against you at the trial court level, the circuit court level in Arkansas. The circuit court level is where I have spent my entire 20-year career. And that's what distinguishes me really from my opponent. Cases that end up before the Court of Appeals have had an adverse ruling at the trial court level. The losing party will appeal then to the Arkansas Court of Appeals. It's not always a direct appeal to the Arkansas Court of Appeals. There are some matters that get appealed directly to the state Supreme Court. Capital murder is such an example that would go straight to the Arkansas Supreme Court. Likewise, though, things that are appealed straight to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court can remand down to the Court of Appeals for the Court of Appeals judges to make a decision upon.
Okay.
It's a unique process. And like I say, it's largely anonymous. I look at the Court of Appeals as similar to an offensive line on a football team. You know, everybody knows who the quarterback is, and they do a good job if the offensive linemen are doing a good job. Nobody knows who the offensive linemen are, and that's what the Court of Appeals represents in our system, being that intermediate appellate court.
Okay. That's a good analogy. Would you tell us about your current position and how you got there?
Certainly. I am currently the prosecuting attorney for Washington and Madison counties. I've held that position for approximately right at a year now. I was sworn in on January 1 of 2025. I received the appointment just before Thanksgiving last year from the governor, Sarah Sanders. Having this position has completely changed my life. Although I've been a prosecutor for 20 years, I'd never been the final authority and leader in an office until a year ago. And I have been honored to be the voice for victims of crime, especially when those victims are children. And it has really been an honor as well to lead an office of about 50 dedicated public servants spread out amongst Madison and Washington counties. About half of those are deputy prosecuting attorneys. And I'm proud to get to use the 20 years of experience I have to help guide those deputy prosecuting attorneys in pursuing justice in the 4th Judicial District.
Yeah. So you were assistant U.S. District Attorney, is that right? For 12 years?
I was an assistant United States Attorney for the United States Department of Justice.
Okay.
When people hear that, they think of Washington, D.C., but I worked right here in the Western District of Arkansas with a bunch of Arkansans that were also United States attorneys and public servants. I was hired for that position back in 2012. It was during the Obama administration. United States Attorney Connor Eldridge hired me and commissioned me as an assistant U.S. attorney. During my time as an assistant U.S. attorney, I handled all manner of what I'm going to describe as complex litigation. I handled the most complex drug trafficking and money laundering cases. That's not all I handled. I worked on civil rights cases where police officers had perhaps gone too far in the course of their duties. I handled victim cases where children have been victims of crimes. It was my honor for 12 years, a little more than 12 years, to be an assistant U.S. attorney. And that's one of the things that sets me apart from my opponent as well, in that because I was an assistant U.S. attorney for so long, I have extensive appellate practice experience. I'll be on the ballot in 7 different counties right now, and there are judicial races on the ballots in almost all of those counties. I believe that I have more appellate court experience than any other judge candidate in any judicial race on the ballot in the 7-county area, perhaps with the exception of the 2 Supreme Court races that'll be on the ballot for that 12-year period, because I handled the most complex serious cases for the United States. Those are the kind of cases that end up before appellate courts.
Right.
So on a regular basis, I found myself arguing before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals in St. Louis, sometimes in St. Paul, Minnesota. And occasionally, if my work crossed into Oklahoma, I would argue before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned these kind of complex cases. I think that's probably important for the Court of Appeals candidate to have that experience and that knowledge. I certainly know about some high-profile cases that you worked shortly after I'd met you. the Devil's Den killer happened. So could you tell us anything about that? I know it's kind of an ongoing case and you may not be able to speak much on it, but
There's very little I can tell you about the Devil's Den case for a couple of different reasons. One is there's a gag order in place in that case. The judge hearing that case, Circuit Judge Taylor, has instituted a gag order. The reason she did that was to protect the defendant's right to a fair trial. So I'm not able to get into the facts of that case with you here today. There are a number of facts that are already in the public record. Those facts that are in the public record are there because myself and the state police wanted the public to feel safe in going back to Devil's Den State Park. We wanted the public to understand that we caught the perpetrator in this case and they were safe in going back to the trails. That is a very, very high profile case. It's the most high profile case that I've handled my entire career. I hope that in the approximate year I have left as the prosecuting attorney in Washington and Madison counties, that I'll be the one to get to see it through. But I know there are times that cases like this take longer than a year, sometimes up to 2 years. In a case where the death penalty is being sought, the process has to be very, very careful because it will end up before an appellate court. And the trial attorneys for both sides in that case have to be immensely careful with the trial process to make sure that the issues they want to preserve for the eventual appeal are preserved property where they can be argued in an appellate court.
Awesome. What are the odds that it ends up in a court of appeals and you're working on it in that aspect?
Your question's kind of twofold, and I can tell you the odds of the State versus McGann case ending up before the Arkansas Court of Appeals is approximately 0. It's a capital murder case. If he's found guilty of capital murder, and he's innocent until proven guilty, but if he is found guilty of capital murder, that is a case that goes straight to the Arkansas Supreme Court.
Okay.
So I would never be someone that would work on it if elected. But just for hypothetical purposes, let's pretend that it could go to the Arkansas Court of Appeals. I would have to recuse myself from that case. It would not be proper or fair to the defendant in that case, or fair to the state if the state had an issue on appeal for me to be the person to hear that case, having been the person that brought the charges and handled the case at the court below.
Sure.
So a question for you, and I know this is a hot topic, is the capacity. Benton County Jail capacity is exceeded. We're at a point where it's more of like a catch and release program. What are your thoughts about that as far as, I guess it's a twofold question. Second question is the recidivism of the youth. I mean, what's in place right now to help alleviate that pressure? I know it was approved for more expansion there. I'd like to know your thoughts.
Certainly. We are facing a similar issue in Washington County. Our jail in Washington County is undergoing expansion right now as well. It's an expansion that is being contested by some groups in my local jurisdiction. Justice is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Justice depends on the individual to whom justice is being sought for, in that case, criminally. There may be cases as a prosecutor where justice is putting somebody in a rehabilitative program. Justice may be sending somebody to prison. Justice may be not filing charges at all in some cases. But incarceration is a tool of our justice system.
Right.
And jails and prisons are part of the infrastructure of that system. And we live here in Northwest Arkansas. We're lucky to live here in Northwest Arkansas, where we've had all of this growth. We've built more schools. We've built bigger hospitals. We've put more lanes on our roads. Jails are part of that infrastructure, and just the population growth alone dictates that we're going to need larger jails and a larger prison system. Now, as far as how big that needs to be, I'm not the person to answer that question. I can tell you that in Washington County, our county jail holds ideally a little less than 600 people.
Okay.
We typically hover around 700 to 750 people in that jail. Now, that's far down from where it was when I took over as prosecutor. We hovered around 900 people in our county jail at about the time I took over as prosecutor. And
so what is that? Because of reduced recidivism or programs that you put folks in to reduce that? Or
all of the above.
Okay.
You know, part of it was the inefficiency of the criminal justice system in Washington County. At the first of this year, that county, which includes my prosecutor's office, overhauled the manner in which cases are heard, where they're heard much faster now. But part of it comes from the state as well, in that at any given time, about 200 of the inmates we have in our jail in Washington County are state inmates. You know, if we could get our state inmates in the custody of the state, we wouldn't have a jail population problem in Washington County. Recidivism programs are important. You know, we've alleviated some jail population in Washington County by utilizing our old county jail as well for the returning home program. We have a program right now that at any given time holds about 50 men. We would like it to become co-ed at some point. We're working on facilities to make it co-ed. But that is strictly a rehabilitative program where people go into the program and come out with job skills, life skills. It is a challenge for somebody in the criminal justice system at times just to get a driver's license. And that is a program that assists with those sort of basic skills and basic needs for people to go out into the public after they've come out of a jail setting and be able to thrive. Now, all that said, I can tell you from my time as a prosecutor that Arkansans crave what I call Arkansas justice. People who end up in anti-recidivism programs, rehabilitative programs, that is a very, very small percentage of what I deal with as a prosecutor on the felony level. There are people in this society who either have decided they're not going to follow the rules, or they are simply too dangerous to let be out amongst us. Those are the kind of people I deal with.
Yep.
Those are the kind of people whose cases end up before the Court of Appeals. You know, somebody who goes through returning homes program and comes out rehabilitated, they don't have a case to appeal. It's the folks who go through a circuit court and have an adverse ruling that end up before the Arkansas Court of Appeals. Because that's where I've spent my time. That's why I believe I'm the best candidate for this position.
Yeah, I think those are the types of cases that have the most severe consequences too. And correct me if I'm wrong, but just recently we saw, you know, an incident in Bentonville where that person who, you know, ultimately lost their life to a road rage incident, but they had, you know, been arrested, you know, several times, numerous times, and that just seems like somebody who would have benefited from either one of those programs, or maybe even being incarcerated, and maybe that person could still be alive today. We've also seen it where, you know, some people that had felony records, you know, rap sheets miles long, that were out in the streets doing crime, and in Pea Ridge, a police officer was killed by that. So I think those are cases that definitely have kind of severe impact to the population out here. So
the first case you mentioned, it's not a case that I'm prosecuting, so I'm not going to go far in depth into the facts of it. But that case represents a really good example of the kind of decisions that a prosecuting attorney for any county in Arkansas has to make on a regular basis. You know, what justice is in that road rage case is something that a prosecutor in your county, Brian Sexton, the prosecuting attorney for Benton County, is going to have to look at all the facts and decide, should somebody be charged here, or should somebody not be charged here? And that's the kind of justice that prosecuting attorneys deal with on every single day. I could cite you dozens of examples of decisions like that I've had to just make in the last year as the prosecuting attorney. You know, I have always tried to be aware that when I sign my name on a line of information, felony information charging someone, that it's changing multiple lives. Now, Circuit Judge Robin Green is who hired me as the deputy prosecuting attorney 20 years ago. That was one of the first things she told me was, be very aware that when you sign your name on that dotted line, that lives are going to change. And I've tried to keep that in the forefront of my mind for the last 20 years as both a state prosecutor and a federal prosecutor for the Department of Justice.
What would you say to people that have feel that the judicial system has failed them? We see a lot of stuff going on at the federal, state, and local level. People feel like they're not being represented properly, that things are happening, people aren't being prosecuted for the things they do. What can we do to restore that confidence back so people believe in the system?
Education. The judicial system that we have in the United States, both state and federal, is not perfect, but it's the best one in the world. Like any system of government, it's run by people.
Right.
People are going to bring into the system their own thoughts, feelings, biases, experiences in making decisions. I'll give you an example that I've dealt with here recently. We had an outcry in Washington County. Oh, it was in the late summer. We had an individual charged with a homicide offense. It dealt with the death of a baby. It was a co-sleeping situation. The case was charged long before I became the prosecutor. I inherited this case in the caseload when I took over the office. After that case was charged, we learned that it was not a homicide case. It was rather a SIDS type death, a sudden infant death. Now, the individual was negligent in that they were co-sleeping, and we adjudicated that case in a manner that was consummate with what the case actually was. And my office took a good deal of heat because there was a perception that the judicial system had failed there. Once the public knew the circumstances surrounding that offense and the adjudication of that offense, there was a complete 180-degree turn in the public's perception. And we went from being viewed as a county that had failed judicially to one that took the care and process and deliberate approach to justice that was necessary in that case. And we actually had handled it in the correct way. So what I would advise to people is don't jump to conclusions just by reading a headline.
Right.
Educate yourself on the case. And you may find that it's different than what you thought it was.
Yeah, a lot of times we're blasted with social media, right? And we don't know the outcome, and we're just running with it. The only reason why I mention that is we see judges that are activist judges that are political. And I think, what was your slogan again that you had?
Yeah, I can't take credit for this. I have a consulting company that's running my campaign, but they put a plug in place called prosecutor, not politician.
Right.
I didn't come up with that myself, but I endorsed it because it's not contrived.
Right.
It's true. I have spent 20 years as a prosecuting attorney making the kind of decisions that a judge has to make on a daily basis. One thing I am not is a politician. Right. I'm wearing a name tag right here. And a good example of that is before we started this interview, I had to go back to my car to get the name tag. I have to do that 100% of the time. Anytime I go to a function, I just am not wired to think politically. Like you, I am not a fan of activist judges. The bench, any judicial bench, be it from the lowest district court level to the highest Arkansas Supreme Court level, and in the federal system, all the way up to the district court and the United States Supreme Court, is not a place for politics.
Right.
Not a place for somebody to advance one's own career. It is a case for a deliberate, measured, unbiased approach to justice. And that's what I'm going to bring to the Arkansas Court of Appeals.
So one question I've got to ask you is, you received 3 distinguished awards from the FBI and another award from the DA. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. Actually, I'm going to correct your number first. I've actually received 4 awards from the FBI because I've gotten one this year. It hasn't been released yet, so there's no reason you would know about it.
Okay.
All of my awards, 3 of my awards from the FBI are for my service to the United States on very complex litigation in narcotics and money laundering cases. I'm not talking about local drug dealers that are selling, a dime bag of meth, marijuana, something like that.
Right.
These were organizations I prosecuted of anywhere between 20 and 50 people, some of which we extradited from another country, that were responsible for bringing massive amounts of methamphetamine into the Western District of Arkansas to here locally. Three of those awards are for cases like that. They represent more than a decade worth of work that I did with the FBI. The fourth, the most recent award from the FBI, the Director's Award, was for my efforts in a case in Franklin County, Arkansas. I had to prosecute the sheriff of Franklin County, Arkansas for civil rights violations. He was going too far in his physical treatment of inmates in his custody, to the point that a grand jury indicted him. We tried him to a jury and he was convicted. Now, we convicted him clear back in 2021. So the fact I've just now gotten the award says something about the speed at which the federal government runs in awarding things. The DEA award was for another complex drug trafficking case I did. However, that award was for a very specific thing that happened during the course of the investigation of that case. We learned that a child was being trafficked from Oklahoma to Arkansas and back. Over the course of our investigation, we were able to intercept that child trafficker, take the child into DHS custody, get them back to their actual home, and have the perpetrators of that prosecuted in the jurisdiction where we learned it had happened. The arrest was not made actually in the Western District of Arkansas. But the DEA award was for, although it was a drug case, a trafficking incident that happened during the drug case.
Okay. And one more quick question. What separates you from Sarah Cap? Or what's the biggest thing? I know you've been at a federal level, right? So what's the biggest, I guess, few bullet points, quick bullet points?
There's really two major ones. The first is my experience. She is a district judge. Judge Cap is a district judge in a district court in Ozark. She hears small claims, speeding tickets, misdemeanor offenses. I've spent my entire career before trial courts. I've had more jury trials that have taken anywhere from a day to several weeks and up to a month to try. I've had more jury trials than I can easily count. I could probably sit down and count them if I wanted to. I think the number is somewhere between 60 and 70 if I was to venture a guess. I do not believe my opponent has the trial court experience on the kinds of cases that end up before the Court of Appeals that I have. I also do not believe that my opponent has the appellate court experience that I have. I have spent hours upon hours before appellate courts arguing appeals. And I believe my experience eclipses hers in that respect. But the major difference between myself and Judge Cap is she is a politician and I am not. She has spent time in the legislature as a representative. She has run a number of campaigns for various offices she has, and quite frankly, she's very good at it. Judge Cap is a wonderful politician, and if you want a politician as your judge, you should vote for Judge Cap. If you're looking for somebody that's not a politician, you should cast your vote for me on March 3rd.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you've proven your point that you're a prosecutor, not a politician. For one, you didn't take credit for the slogan. So I think a lot of politicians would have never told us that. And then you didn't tell us about the awards. We had to do our homework and find it ourselves. So in the event that you forget to tell the viewers of the NWA Exchange about your website or social media, how could they get a hold of you if they want to help you, or if they just want more information? What's the best way to reach out to you?
We are on the internet. You can do a simple Google search of my name, and not only, I think the first thing you will find is our campaign's website. You'll also find a number of things about me from my career that just a Google search turns up as well, and I'd encourage people to look that over. We are also on Facebook and Instagram, both of which are new things for me. I was not a social media person, and quite frankly, I don't think I'm very good at it. But we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. A search of my name will lead you to both of those sites.
So I have BrandonCarterForJudge.com. That's your site.
That is indeed our website.
Okay. All right.
And then any closing statements, anything that we didn't cover that you'd like the voters to know about you? I
really appreciate all of the support I've gotten for this campaign. I have never run for anything before, so people will ask me how it's going. And I tell them, I don't really have the slightest idea how it's going. I've never done this before, but I feel like it's going really well. I feel what I think is momentum building. And I'm very excited for Election Day to get here on March 3rd. And I would really appreciate your vote on March 3rd for Brandon Carter for the Arkansas Court of Appeals. Thank you both.